My objections to much technology and survival gear comes from the following. The power source on all these items is perishable. Their batteries may last hours, days, even weeks, but they do eventually run out. Hey there, Rednecks, Preppies, Redneck Preppies. It's me, the Redneck Preppy. How you doing today? Great. Good. If you've been watching this channel's videos over the past few months, you might have noticed a slight change in a long-held opinion, my resistance, and occasionally even hostility to the idea of technology in survival gear. Now, I released a video recently about how I consider it possible to integrate technology into survival gear, with some caveats. And I announced in another that I now included a multi-sport GPS watch along with my survival kit. Well, friends, I have a bit of an admission to make. I've fallen even further down the technology rabbit hole. Now, before we leap into the meat of the video, I want to make it clear that I consider multi-sport GPS watches to be backups to primary gear. These are not replacements for things like maps and compasses or even your own knowledge. That said, I come to make a statement. If you're someone who spends a good amount of time in the outdoors, be it fishing, hunting, hiking, or camping, and wants to spend some money, you know what? A multi-sport GPS watch could be a useful addition to your arsenal. In that survival kit video, I revealed that I had bought a Garmin Instinct watch, this one right here, but since then I have upgraded to the Garmin Fenix 6 Pro. Now, this is not an ad for Garmin or its watches. There are a number of companies like Suunto, Chorus, Timex, Casio, and others that make watches that are in this space. I just happen to be a fan of Garmin watches. Your mileage may vary. So, why do I think it behooves you outdoorsy types to at least consider one of these watches? Well, this Fenix 6 Pro is a great watch, and you'll immediately notice that it's certainly one chunky lad, as one would hope from a watch that brags that it passes military standards for thermal shock and water resistance. You got yourself some Gorilla Glass, a fiber reinforced polymer case with a metal back. It can handle a beating. This is seriously tank-like. And you can also buy them with sapphire crystal and solar charging if you want to spend more. Readability is excellent. It has a sunlight visible transflected memory in pixel display. And no, I don't know what the hell any of that just meant. But it also means the brighter the sun, the easier it is actually to read. Not something that you usually hear from these kinds of watches. Also has a backlight, so you can read at night, and I don't think you can really see it with the lights that I currently have set up. Battery life depends on how you use it. You can get up to 15 days in sport watch mode, 36 hours in GPS mode. Not bad for a watch that you do need to charge up. Now, that out of the way, let's get to the actual interesting stuff. The strength of these watches are the applications that they run. Most of these watches have customizable faces to choose what information you want displayed, so I won't go too deep on this. You can see that on my watch, you've got things like sunrise and sunset, the current temperature. You can customize it to include other information in the data fields that you're allowed to change. These are just the ones that I happen to have chosen. The magic, though, is what happens with the applications and widgets that most of these phones come with, and you can also download. Let's take a tour of what's on mine. Now, almost all of the widgets that I use are stock to the phone, with one exception, and I'll point that out. Most of the widgets can be interacted with so that you can actually get more information. Let's take a look at the temperature widget, which is the first one. Oh, let's try that again. So you get yourself your current conditions and that stuff, but if you engage with it further, you get hourly forecasts, you get daily forecasts, trend lines, everything. Really kind of useful when you're out in the woods. Given that this is an ABC watch with an altimeter, barometer and compass, you get that kind of information as well. Again, useful, particularly if, let's say, you're a hiker. The only non-stock application that I have in here is the Hunt and Fish widget, which is from Garmin itself. There's not much to it really, but it tells you what the day's prognosis for success would be. So if I were to go out today, it would be a good day to either hunt or fish, plus the times which are best and good for those activities. Now, I don't really know the utility of this information. I know it's based on moon phases, which does at least play a part in fishing, but it's interesting to have available to you. It's also got your standard health information if you're interested. Obviously, I don't know how it's recording our heart rate since it's not on my wrist, but here we are. It's got all that sort of stuff in there too. And like I said, you can add other widgets. You've got sunrise and sunset, which is awesome. And it's also got past data for sunrises and sunset, as well as going forward into the future. So that's pretty neat too. Again, stuff that's useful to you if you're an outdoors person. The star, though, is probably the built-in GPS tracking and navigation. You know, I remember the time decades ago, I bought a GPS unit for my car. And if you had told me that most of that same functionality would be replicated on a wristwatch, I probably would have doubted you. Now let's just choose the hike activity. So you're immediately presented with a data screen, which will give you useful information for, that activity, but you also have a map. Now, I'm going to cut the camera because it'll actually default to where I am now, and no reason to dox my location. So I'll be back in just a moment. All right, random spot in the far north selected. I have no idea where this is, but you have here your map screen. Now, obviously, if you choose a more interesting spot than I did, it would have plenty of features and all that sort of navigate around. It'll show your progress with a track, and it's also capable of guiding you back to the start of your journey. Plus, it's an actual GPS with points of interest built in, so you can actually use this thing in cities as well. Now, despite my hostility towards technology when it comes to outdoors gear, particularly survival gear, I have to admit that having this kind of information at hand, at least as a backup to the old school stuff I prefer, is pretty valuable. Yeah, you can gather all of this information before you go out, weather forecasts, for example, but things change while you're out there. And yeah, I'm not giving up on a map and compass for, navigation when I need it, but I have to confess that having the same utility on my wrist is a bit intoxicating. This map isn't the same caliber as a good topo map, but don't get me wrong, for a lot of use cases, this is actually probably enough. Now, there are some cons to these watches. The first and most obvious one is cost. A simple field watch can cost you a few bucks. I paid a grand total of $10 for this Timex Expedition more than a decade ago, and as you can see, it still works. The lowest cost watch in this space, at least from a reputable company, can cost you a few hundred. This Phoenix, I keep saying Phoenix, it's Phoenix. This Phoenix 6 Pro cost me over 500 Canadian, and this is actually a generation behind because Garmin has a Phoenix 7 out. It's not hard to sink over $1,000 into one of these watches. That's why I recommend looking at something like the previous generation of watches from these companies. Many of them do the exact same job without some nice but often not life-changing upgrades. That said, this Garmin Instinct, which I referred to earlier, costs less than $200 Canadian, and it does a lot of the same stuff. You don't really have to spend that much money. The second caveat is that these are smart watches, which means they work best in concert with a smartphone. That's troubling to people like me because you have a device that's not dependent on outside technology to fully function, but in fact you have a device that's dependent on another device to fully function. That said, most of the core functions do work independent of a smartphone, but things like temperature data, for example, are pulled from your phone. What I do like about this Fenix 6 Pro is that it's largely independent of my phone. I can't speak for all of these watches, but this is a chunky boy with the weight to match. If you don't like heavier watches, that could be a turnoff for you. The big one, though, is battery life. 36 hours in GPS mode sounds like a lot, and it is if you're out on day or weekend trips. But in a survival situation, the watch may run out before you do. There are power-saving options to extend that battery life, but they make the watch less useful. So unless you're prepared to carry a battery pack to recharge as necessary, do remember that unlike, let's say, your compass, which works as long as the Earth has a magnetic core, this watch will give up the ghost in navigation terms in less than 2 days. So is a multi-sport GPS watch a necessity for outdooring? No, man, it's a luxury item. That said, these things can be a valuable source of information and assistance if you're out in God's land. Getting a storm warning before something happens is a wonderful thing. Having things like ABC, sunrises and sunsets, moonrises and sets, fishing hunt times, and navigation on your wrist can add to your excursions. And I mean, even the health information is pretty useful to people, like hikers and such. That said, if someone opts not to buy one, I can absolutely dig it. It's a lot of money to spend to have information that in many cases you can gather before you even leave or do so out in the field. For me, though, I actually don't think I could go back to a regular watch when I'm in places now off the beaten path. Agree or disagree? Well, that is why we have a comment section below, folks. Feel free to leave your thoughts on the matter. Am I bowing to the obvious, or have I rejoined the Matrix? At any rate, I hope you found today's video to be at least vaguely entertaining and mildly informative. As always, I hope your jaunts into nature are nothing short of inspirational to the rest of your life. You take care, and bye-bye.